crueldad, pero esta vez me separaron. Dijeron mucho, pero no se olvidaron de callarse. Cuánto odio por mi piel sembraron. Dijeron historia y la tergiversaron. Dijeron guerra, muerte, odio y nos culparon. Siempre. Enfermedades, epidemias nos contagiaron. Exterminación de mi fauna complace a tus mercados. Dijeron riqueza y todos se lo robaron. Oro, platino, diamante, a la fuerza se lo llevaron. Y la actualidad es tan triste que todo aquello que dijeron es lo mismo que hoy se dice más. ¿Quién dice, quién explota, quién se beneficia? El asesino, el mismo que da las noticias. Hay una cuenta fácil que siempre me da las grandes riquezas, de dónde vienen y hacia dónde van.
Independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao. Somos resistentes como los Mao Mao, independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao. Somos resistentes como los Mao Mao. Nati Dre es afroresistencia, cultura ancestral, afrodescendencia, solidaridad. Esa es la esencia, la diáspora africana eleva la conciencia, conciencia negra, universal, progresista y transcultural. Negros y mestizos revolucionando, pueblos caribeños y africanos en un solo bando. No más explotación, colonialismo interno, no más confusión, supremacía blanca en el Babilón. Soy rojo, negro y verde, afroliberación. Mientras más negro, más represión. Somos creadores, recupera tu visión. Mi misión es educar con amor, contra el silencio, vivo sin temor. Independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao. Somos resistentes como los Mao Mao, independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao. Somos resistentes como los Mao Mao.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Rise Up Morning Show. Ooh. I sounded so monotone right now. How you guys doing? How's everybody doing?
Like I always say, it's all good, man.
It's all good,
man. Hey, it is all good. It's good to be back, man. Good to see y'all.
Yeah, you fell down a rabbit hole, found your way back up. What's going on?
Away for like 3 months.
Yeah, it's only been a couple weeks.
Came at a good time because everybody was complaining about Boona. So
I was just making sure we can let Boona shine, because so I had to step away.
He had been complaining. So
I've been working. I had to get back to work. I work at a school, so we had to start getting the books ready, everything ready before the kids get back. I started preseason at the same time, basketball preseason camp.
Mm-hmm.
So I just had a lot going on. Plus I'm working on my certification to be a health and wellness coach. So it was just a lot going on. And, but thank y'all for holding it down. I was watching whenever I could, when I was going from one place to another, watching the Rise Up. Shout out to all of you.
So you watch me shine on the show, right?
Exactly. I was watching Boona shining. And shout out to Kalanji, to Ikemba and Natasha. It's really dope. I love how this is growing. I did want to share a story with y'all real quick, man. During this little time I was away, I got a chance to go with my family. We actually went to Nantes. So Boona will know where Nantes is. It's a city. It's a city not too far away from where I live, from Rennes, right here in France.
Western part of France.
Exactly. So we went to Nantes because my wife has a friend over there, and I took my son to this memorial of the abolition of slavery. I don't know if you ever seen it. Have you seen it, Boona? Have you been there?
I haven't been there yet.
Yeah, Hopefully. There's a little memorial, there for the abolition of slavery. I mean, it's where we at. It's not like the most radical thing we could have, but it's okay. It has some interesting parts, in the memorial, and so we're walking around and everything, and kids in the memorial, you know how kids are, man. They're usually they playing around, they moving around, but then I see a couple. There's this one part in the memorial which has just a bunch of dates, right? It has just dates of certain things that happened throughout history, right? So in school here in France, they teach the children about Napoleon, right? And they make Napoleon be like a hero, like a good person, right? My son once came home and he told me they learned about Napoleon. So I asked him, so what'd you learn? Like, yeah, he was a great warrior, so they depict him as a positive figure, right, in school here. So I brought my son and I was like, look at this here. What does this say right here? Because before I had told my son, who's 8 years old, by the way, he had asked me about slavery, and I explained to him what slavery was about. So on this little chart, it said, that in 1802, Napoleon put something in place to reinstate slavery.
Yeah.
Right. And so he read it, right? He read that. I made him read it out loud. I'm like, read this. So he read it. And then he was like, okay. So he was like, so I could see him, thinking. He was thinking hard. He was like, okay, so, and then he was like,
I was confused.
Yeah, he was a little bit confused, because he knows what slavery is, even though he's 8 and everything, and he has learned about it. So I was able to speak to him a little bit about that, and it was interesting. And the other really interesting part was that, it was the dates of the abolition of slavery, right? And we know like the latest country was Brazil, right?
Yeah.
But not too far before that was Cuba, And for those of you who don't know, I'm Afro-Cuban, so Cuba was
I think it's actually the same year.
Cuba was 1886. Brazil was like 2 years after that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, Brazil was like a couple years after that. So
This is
anyway,
1898, right?
Brazil, I think 88.
88, okay.
Yeah. So Cuba was 1886, right? And he saw it on there. I was like, look, Cuba, 1886. And so, because me, side note, my father had me late. So my father was born in 1927, right? My father was born in 27. Okay, so, basically my grandfather was born enslaved. You know what I'm saying? My grandfather was born enslaved in Cuba. So I'm telling him this, like, your grandfather was born in 1927. So imagine this. You see, this is 1886. So it's not that far away. You know what I'm saying? So I see him standing around and now he's thinking again. And I'm looking at him. He's not walking around going crazy anymore. Now he's thinking. So I'm like, all right. So it was interesting, but we kept on looking, walking around. And by the time we left, I came to my son and I was like, listen, do you want to talk about this? You want to talk about it a little bit? Because I saw that he was kind of interior taking everything inside. I was like, you want to talk about it? And he was like, he looked at me, he was like, no, I understand. He told me, I understand. And he looked at me straight up. So I was like, okay. So I was like, whenever you want to talk about it, let me know. So I thought that was pretty deep. That was pretty deep for me. Like it was a deep moment. You know what I'm saying? So just wanted to share that with y'all, man.
No, that's pretty, like how you said, it's pretty deep, because I mean, for a kid to kind of resonate, and again, you didn't push, you didn't like forcibly, it was it was through curiosity, exactly. And then I think, that's the appropriate way, I think, to go to teach, not just your children, but also teach children in general, history, and how it is it is narrated today, through a lens. So yeah, no, Bruno, what was your weekend like? How's everything for you? I know that
I didn't do much over the weekend, but I just wanted to make a very short comment on what Fernando said, because I don't have a son, I have a daughter actually. So I think in terms of education, the approach will be different. But I was telling some of my friends that, I'm wondering how to not make it brutal, to our kids, the introduction to racism and not only history of racism, but also the present, because they have to be prepared at very early age to face, what it is like to live or grow up in a racist society without any illusion. Because I think it's also our responsibility to make sure that they don't have no any illusion on how they'll be treated in the society, right? Because they'll be the first victims of police violence. They'll be. I'm talking about boys. Okay, so that's
Yeah.
why I was thinking. In terms when it comes to girls, maybe the approach will be different. But even if it's a girl, she will face the same type of racism. But anyways, I think at some point, I don't know. Maybe we'll need advice from child psychologists. But this
Yeah.
is something that they have to be prepared for, because the
True.
shock they'll receive
Yeah.
might be very very brutal,
Yeah. It's
right?
tough.
Because basically the society is going to teach some values that it's not practicing. Okay. In France they talk about liberté, égalité, fraternité.
Yeah.
Okay.
Freedom, equality,
uh,
and
and
brotherhood.
brotherhood, which some people have mixed up, and they say liberté, égalité, va te faire niquer, which is like freedom, equality, and go
Go
fuck
fuck
yourself.
yourself.
At the expense of Najar, you know.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is something that we have. Maybe we will need to have a separate session on that. This is
Well,
something I
Yeah.
know.
I think that that what you're getting at also speaks to the conversation that we're going to have today with Dr. Matthew Alford,
Yeah,
co-writer of
absolutely.
National Security Cinema, also writer of Writer with No Hands. There's another book that I didn't even know that he had written, and so I'm trying to get my hands on it, and I can't find it for the life of me, even a PDF copy. So yeah, like I didn't know that he had written a book about, I believe it's the labor union,
Mm.
if I'm not mistaken. I might be mistaken. I mean, he is looking very curiously. I can see him. His camera is on, so I'm not too sure if that's really the book. I misspelled the words. But no, I think the conversation that we're having resonates exactly to what not only Fernando brung up, which thank you, by the way, for bringing that up, because again, that's very you have a show called Vital Hoops, and here I am saying the word vital. It's very vital to our diaspora, for them to learn, but not be forced, through, like it be, for it to come gradual, for it to come at the
Mm.
rate, and stage that your son came to. And
Yeah.
everybody's holistic, so it's, we're not
Yeah.
monolithic people, so there's obviously different approaches and different fast paces that might be implemented.
Mm.
But Buna, when you compound it on, I think this conversation really does fit in. Today's conversation is going to be with Dr. Matthew Alford, again, writer of National Security Cinema, along with Tom Secker. But Tom Secker is not here today, unfortunately. And we're going to be going over the shocking new evidence that was uncovered in 2017, that then in turn got made into a docu movie that goes over the manipulation, indoctrination through the DoD's support for certain said movies that we like, certain said franchises. That goes for Marvel's Avengers, that goes for cartoons, that goes for Cake Boss, Extreme Makeover Home Edition, all of these shows and whatnot. But most importantly, the movies that we like. If any individual out there that's in the chat right now that watched in 1995, as I know that there's some individuals that are elders that are in the chat, watched Tuskegee Airmen. Tuskegee Airmen was a heavily funded, scripted movie, which Matthew, for today, we're not really going to go in depth in that, so that's why I'm kind of doing it some justice until I can get maybe Roger Stahl to come on. I think he talks about it in Militamen Inc., if I'm not mistaken, which is another book that I highly advise individuals to go and pick up and read. But Tuskegee Airmen was heavily scripted. It was multiple rewrites. The fact that they went through a surplus of bomber planes, blew them up. A lot of that was not CGI. They didn't have CGI relatively. They did back then, but it wasn't as prevalent and
Right.
new as it is now. So they use
Mm.
practical effects, which is literally just blowing up planes, and at the expense of taxpayers' dollars. But we will even dive into movies that the DoD and the CIA didn't want to be
Mm.
created, which are talked about in this through case studies that they have created through, again, National Security Cinema. I have my own copy right here. I've been jokingly saying I want to know, based off of the viewership from my network, how many books have been have been bought since I've been talking about this, because it is a
3,000.
three. But we're gonna take a quick break before we get to that. So please enjoy some words from Chris Haney. We'll be right back.
Rise up.
Rise up.
I was a militant and angry young man. I wanted to go back and fight after resting for a few months. I found our movement totally unprepared for the continuation of the armed struggle in South Africa. That was my reading of the situation. Of course, there were reasons that they were put forward. I found a lot of preoccupation with solidarity work, with international work. And I found a lot of demoralization amongst our chaps who were in camps in Zambia. And I began to agitate for the resumption of the armed struggle, for seriousness on the part of the leadership. I'm using the word seriousness because in my own view, and this was a subjective point of view, that they were not serious. And I became part of the writing of a memorandum which was very critical of the leadership. Well, that memorandum put us into some trouble. The leadership was angry. They thought our attacks were unfounded and irrational. And some of them felt that our attacks bordered on insubordination and on mutiny. We were suspended from the organization. But that memorandum brought about a lot of heated discussion within the ANC. The need to have a conference, the need to work out a clearer strategy of struggle, of revolutionary struggle. And ironically, there was the Morogoro conference. We were excluded from the Morogoro conference because we were regarded as rebels. But I'm able to say that Morogoro conference ushered in serious discussions which led to for the first time to the formulation of a clear strategy about the waging of a revolutionary war in the country, of a people's war, the need to build the underground, the need for propaganda, the need for mass mobilization. So, despite the fact that, I sort of suffered as a co-author of the document in terms of isolation, in terms of suspension, but I felt that I was going to accept any sort of punishment because I told the people, though some of them thought that I was a traitor, that my basic objective is struggle in South Africa. I could have left, as others did, and to go and study. I had a degree from Rhodes University. But I felt that I was not going to go and study. It was my revolutionary duty to be part of the armed struggle of the revolution in South Africa. So I was able to understand, the anger and the bitterness of others. And but I felt that, whatever they said, I was not a traitor. I had no malicious intentions in writing that document. That document was a product of my own subjective feelings about the need to intensify the battles inside South Africa. And I'm happy that, we remained and they continue to be part of preparations for the continuation of the political and military struggle inside our country. I want to be honest. I was annoyed. I was marooned in the Transkei when the decision was taken to suspend the armed struggle. My indemnity had been withdrawn. I had spent more than 27 years in MK. I'd spent the best part of my life in an armed struggle against this regime. I was angry and bitter that this decision was taken without comprehensive consultation. That was my immediate gut feeling. I didn't sleep when our delegation was locked with de Klerk negotiating. I was waiting for the outcome. When there was that press conference early in the morning announcing the suspension of military activities, felt like crying. I'm one of the people who have seen comrades dying, both inside the country and outside the country, in the struggle against the regime of terror in Pretoria. I know the names, I know the faces. I know how these young people put aside everything in life to concentrate in the fight against white domination. And I said to myself, probably this was the right decision. But why was it that there was no widespread consultation with those who were actually involved in the physical side of armed struggle? That was my initial reaction. But like a disciplined soldier, a disciplined member of the movement, the decision had been taken. I had to understand this decision. And when it was explained that it was important to maintain the momentum of negotiations, I was ready to be reined in to explain it to other comrades. And I did it. Because in a movement as big as ours, sometimes you've got to subject your own strong personal views and accept the views
All right, that was Chris Haney. We're going to jump right into it and bring up Dr. Matthew Alford of the University of Bath, co-writer of National Security Cinema and Writers with No Hands. Glad to have you on. How are you doing, Doctor?
Very good to be with you. Hi, everyone.
Welcome. Thank you for being.
Hello. Yes. So first, before we get into the direct questions, let's just get right into it. National Security Cinema, you and your co-author, discuss how Hollywood collaborates with the U.S. military to produce films that align with national security interests. From a decolonial Marxist viewpoint, how do these collaborations reflect and perpetuate white hegemony and capitalist ideologies?
Ease me in gently then, Isaac. Thanks for the straightforward. Well, of course, this is the very tip of the spear, isn't it? This is what I've been looking at, and Tom Secker has been looking at, and Roger Stahl and a handful of others, is the tip of the spear. It is the most invested, most powerful, most tooled up national security organizations, the ones with the most money and the most ability to control and direct narratives. That's so. Of course, they are going to be hegemonic in all of the ways that you describe, and they have the ability to do that. I mean, one of the things that was so interesting about it, and what kind of kept me doing the research, when around about 2013, 14, probably I'd have stopped doing it, but it became so interesting because we realized how secret it was, and I think that was one of the most sort of headline aspects of our work has been to see the scale of what, as I'm sure you've elucidated many times, the scale of the Department of Defense's role, along with NYPD, LAPD, FBI, CIA, and a smattering of films supported by the White House and other government organizations. The scale is enormous, and it goes surpasses 10,000 episodes and films and so on, as well as sporting events and things. So the scale is one thing that we often emphasize, but the other thing is the secrecy, the sheer secrecy that is that certainly has surrounded this over the past half century or so, which has been caused by the way that the Department of Defense and these other organizations has chosen to conduct themselves as PR organizations that don't really want their hand to be seen. That's perhaps changed a little bit over the past few years, partly because we've found loads of things, and partly because their operations within the entertainment system are so extensive that they kind of want to show them off to other producers so that they can actually control it. It's kind of hiding in plain sight, almost, you could say. These organizations controlling so many film and TV shows and computer games, of course, but without as long as they can control as long as they can keep secret the actual script changes, particularly where there are controversial political script changes, they are reasonably at ease to sort of be out there as as public entities. They don't mind the practice being known as long as the details aren't known. But the details are exactly what we've been able to pull apart in recent years, and it presents this horrible narrative that you've been discussing, which is hegemonic and pro-capitalistic and racist and imperialistic and all of those things that Karl Marx would have predicted of the dominant class. Volume.
Yeah, it's my bad. You had answered 1 and 2 partial.
Good.
Kind of.
You thought you'd got me on that first question by making it complicated.
Okay. I'd like to actually get into our particular movie, just in brief, and how you were able to uncover just the relationship between not necessarily that this movie was funded, and I'm talking about Hotel Rwanda, so that for everybody in the chat. Hotel Rwanda wasn't a DoD or CIA funded movie. It didn't have any script changes that came from the DoD, any support relatively at all. But there was, if you go a little deeper, were some relationships that correlate with the movie still aligning with
with state narratives. Absolutely. So although the Department of Defense didn't work on the 2004 film Hotel Rwanda, the State Department did. And in fact, it was written by a senior employee of the State Department, the actual book that it was based on. So I find it a little bit uncomfortable to discuss a really controversial and extremely bloody event in history from 1994, the genocide in Rwanda. And I'm not making any judgment about what the real history is there, but it is the case that in reality there was a lot of CIA support for one side over the other, and there was a great deal of investment from the US government in making sure that that country turned into exactly what it has turned into and exactly what they wanted it to turn into, which is a autocracy, maybe even a dictatorship.
It's a proxy government, a puppet government,
with an extremely good economy for the vast majority of the past 20 odd years. But also very much an ally of the United States, and one which is conducting attacks also within Central Africa, and of course is allowing the United States to dominate the mining industries and getting special metals for phones and things like that. So someone had described I don't remember who it was now. I think it might have been an ambassador of some kind, said that Hotel Rwanda was big chunks of propaganda interrupted by bouts of excellent acting, which I thought was quite an interesting way of describing the film. Say again, Buna?
No, I said that's a good breakdown.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know if you guys know the actual history of imperialism within the DRC better than I do. You probably do, but it is nonetheless the case that the film, which was obviously fated amongst liberal circles across the Western world, was part of the reason that it was approved of. was because it suited the narrative that was being laid out by the White House and others.
Okay, I'm gonna pass this over to Buna. And ask a couple questions.
Yeah, just very quickly, wanted to make a comment on Rwanda, because the actual, hero of the Hotel Rwanda movie, I think he was exiled in the US, and he was kidnapped by Kagame a few years ago.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. But I wouldn't call Rwanda a dictatorship, because Kagame, he ran for election again for his fourth term, and he got only 99%.
Rusesabinga.
Yeah, Rusesabinga. So Kagame, in the latest election,
99, huh? 99%.
99.99%. So
okay,
it's
someone out there is not happy. One person.
Yeah, I think. Anyway,
yeah, it's
sorry,
so interesting.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say it's so interesting because so much of our time over the past decade has been spent focused on where there has been Department of Defense support or CIA support, but sometimes the most interesting and sort of controlled products are actually the ones that didn't have DoD. We talked about this the other day, Isaac, didn't we? About films like I don't know, even one we didn't discuss the other day would be something like Rocky IV. Which I happened to be on TV the other day, so it's on my mind. That was incredibly a real Cold War piece of propaganda. Literally at the end of it, you've got President Gorbachev from the Soviet Union, sort of looking shamefacedly that Rocky has won this fight against his the Soviet fighter Drago. You couldn't write a more perfect piece of propaganda. But that didn't have Department of Defense, didn't have White House, didn't have anyone from the government coming in. It was just Sylvester Stallone wrote a script that he thought would work well, and he was right. So, and to a greater or lesser extent, is the same thing with Hotel Rwanda and many other products. We talked the other day about American Sniper, didn't we? With again, like the Department of Defense doesn't want to be investing in that. The Department of Defense doesn't want to look like it's advocating the assassination of men, women, and children through sniper fire and then glorifying the leader. It's too rich for their blood. They want everything to be nice and bland. All their propaganda needs to be nice and non-controversial.
That's just like what they did with Tuskegee Airmen. I just had to throw that in there. Like they that's if we can get Roger Stahl on as soon as he can.
I think Roger talked in Theatres of War. I think he talks about that one with where they have all of the kind of evil racist opinions are all put onto a kind of disposable politician, so put onto the civilian leadership rather than, and I think it might even be, is it a fictionalized civilian?
It's they replace the roles of the senator and I believe the colonel. But that movie was heavily re-scripted. I think Buna does have some questions that I think maybe correlate with what we're talking about. So
yeah. So in your book, you put emphasis on the ability of the military-industrial complex to shape narratives and influence film content. So I was wondering how we can analyze those movies through the colonial lens. Those movies, they tend to perpetuate Western-centric views, and marginalize non-Western views. But even if when they do promote non-Western views or even decolonial approach, it's done in a way that eventually present the West as the savior. I'll just give an example to illustrate what I'm saying.
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Which I watched the movie that all of you are familiar with, Black Panther, first one. Watched it twice actually. First watched it with some friends, and they were very happy. They were all doing this sign. They were so proud seeing black actors, black director. But if you look at that movie very, carefully, you realize that there are very few white, for example, and the only good white guy there is a CIA agent.
Yeah.
And he's actually the hero. A hero who's saving a nation of Africans killing themselves. Even between brothers. So this was supposed to be a movie glorifying African, African technology, African, African kingdoms and African capacity to resist Western, hegemony. But at the end of the day, it's still promoting Western propaganda. So I was wondering, even when there is a narrative that is based on, let's say, decolonial perspective, how can we make sure that we don't fall into the trap that they're trying to make us fall into?
The neoliberal trap. Yeah.
Yeah. So I agree with you. There's a real risk of that, and actually, those more subtle narratives, those more subtle scripts that feign to do the right thing, that feign to challenge established or entrenched power systems, are almost more dangerous than the kind of obvious ones, and certainly more dangerous than the kind of cheesy sort of right wing sort of things that might be much more easily dismissed. I think Black Panther is probably a good example. Although, again, I mean, with films, I think it's worth noting that the way that people and this doesn't come across in my work at all, by the way, but I should emphasize that people read films in all sorts of different ways. I try to be like, no, it's like this. I like because it just makes a crisper writing style. But I do know a lot of people who really got something out of Black Panther, even though they recognize that that there was some dodgy aspects of it politically. It would be the same thing with something like Avatar, which again was promoted as a decolonial, anti-imperialist film, but there were all sorts of ambiguities and contradictions and compromises that were made along the way there. So in fact, at the end of the day, the hero of that is, it's someone who's been disabled through war, but nonetheless, it is an American Marine who is still the hero of that whole thing. There's I haven't got it in front of me now, but there's a really interesting discussion because it's sold by Fox, Avatar. It's distributed by Fox, and James Cameron has to go, and because James Cameron's made loads of sort of quite provocative political statements to sort of sell the film, say, this is an anti-imperialist film or anti-colonial film, I think he says, and then he has, it's in our book somewhere.
It is. I'm looking for it right now.
So James Cameron, the director, has to go on to Fox News, and obviously they're like, oh, well, we don't really want to be saying anything positive about decolonial narratives and anti-imperialism, and so they have this really awkward conversation. I think it's Bill Riley and James Cameron, and they just sort of awkwardly get their way through this conversation about imperialism. Because no one wants to, the network, the Fox and 20th Century Fox, they don't want to lose the $1 billion, by doing some car crash interview on live TV. So to follow up on your question, I think it's a common problem. It's very difficult to get rid of all, This is an example you may not know because I think I've discussed it, but he's on my mind. There's a British director, been working since the 60s, really famous, called Ken Loach.
Yeah.
My friend the other day was really annoyed at Ken Loach because he did a film about people claiming benefits in Britain, and it was about working class people who are really struggling.
I watched that movie. Was it released like 3 years ago?
I, Daniel Blake. I think it did reasonably well.
Yeah, I, Daniel Blake. Yeah.
So in that film, the main character is a poor, nice northern bloke who gets laid off from work, and so he has to go to the job centre to try and get benefits, and they're going to try and help him find work. But of course, the whole system is rigged. It's an absolute and in the real world it is. And Ken Loach has done exactly the right thing to present how awful the system is, how it screws over people, how it pigeonholes people in completely inappropriate ways. But one of the key scenes of that, which is very kind of entertaining and funny scene that's used in the trailer, is of this poor working class chap trying to use a mouse on a computer, and he doesn't know what a mouse is because I can't remember what his job was before, but it's been manual work, I think. And so he's using the mouse, trying to like make it go in the air like that rather than, do you know what I mean? So it's a scene in which this guy is shown to be completely inadequate to fit into the British benefit system and how horrible the benefit system is. And it's powerful and it's emotive and it's on the right side. It's a left-wing film that's arguing for decency and a touch of human kindness in the system. And that's all of Ken Loach's work. It's brilliant. But my friend was like, yeah, but why? They've got this patronizing. They've got him not being able to use a mouse. Of course, everyone can use it. He could use a mouse in the real world. If that person was in the real world, he'd be able to use a bloody mouse. So it's making the working class people look like they're thick and they're not. And so do you know what I mean? Like, that's a compromise that Ken Loach has taken there. Okay. And of course, there are people who probably can't use a computer at all well. But it was still it was an inadvertent or even a deliberate choice to sort of sell the film with a kooky little scene, because it's, you know, it lightens the black humor of the movie. That kind of thing happens all the time. It's quite difficult to get a film which is. Another example would be Oppenheimer. You know, Oppenheimer is. And sorry, I'll try and answer your question even more directly in just a second, Boona. But Oppenheimer was an interesting film, which, you know, again, I feel that that's on the right side of you know, it was arguing against the use of the atom bomb. I would say certainly it was arguing against the proliferation of use and sale of and development of nuclear weapons after Hiroshima. Even if Hiroshima was the right thing to do, it was saying, no, don't do it again. Don't do it again. That's psychotic. And it was also saying, let's make sure that this technology is controlled and that the Soviets don't, and that whatever we do with the Soviets, we're doing it in concert, because else we're going to end up at loggerheads. Now, there's a good example of a film that I think, again, sort of had its politics right. It's Christopher Nolan, and it seemed quite sound from what I can see.
I would have to say, because when you look at it from a decolonial lens, they did not reference the fact that indigenous people had been subjugated to that. So that's one thing.
Exactly. That's what I was going to.
Okay,
exactly
my bad.
what I was going to say. So there is a fundamental limit that they don't show. In fact, they don't even show one image of anyone suffering from the use of the bomb. I think you're referring to the tests, the Bikini Atoll, and those things.
Yeah, the testing areas were indigenous,
but also but of course the Japanese as well. So the main victims in that film are the guys who make the atom bomb, like these sort of incredibly educated, wealthy, powerful, morally extraordinarily compromised sort of white guys out in the desert. They are the main victims, and so they're the people we sympathize with. So even in a film like that, which overall I think has its sort of heart in the right place, there's a gigantic compromise in terms of what they're doing politically. And sorry, but Boona, I hope I can answer the question very directly. So the way I always did it, and I haven't made it very explicit in the books that I've done recently, but when I was first getting into this, I thought that the way of addressing how to read a film politically was to look at who are the heroes, to what extent are they connected to established concentrations of power, particularly established concentrations of illegitimate power. So first thing, looking at the heroes. Secondly, looking at the villains. Again, who are they? If they're Iraqi or Iranian or whatever it is, that has significance. If they are aliens, maybe it has less significance. You know, Independence Day is not as significant a political film as Courage Under Fire or American Sniper or whatever, because it's not demonizing a particular group. So looking at the heroes, looking at the villains, looking at the victims, and how are those victims portrayed? To what extent are they humanized? Are they portrayed in a way that's a bit like, oh yeah, they're victims, or do those victims actually have agency Are they represented as more than just stereotypes? Do they actually have screen time? Look at a film like Munich about the response to the 1972 Olympics by Israel when they go around, they assassinate a dozen or so Palestinians. Now, in a way, again, it's an interesting film. It's kind of a good film, and it was received as being by Spielberg in 2005. That was received as an even-handed cry of peace. But actually, if you look at it, the victims in that, the Palestinians, they're given about 2.5 minutes of airtime. It's about 2.5 minutes that they're actually given to say what their struggle is about. And also, even at the end of that scene, that crucial 2.5 minute scene where they talk about their orange groves and how they want, they should be able to get back to their farming, and it's basically just dismissed by the hero, who's just like, screw you, basically. And so we're as audiences, we are framed, we are encouraged to sympathize with that side and not with the Palestinians. So heroes, villains, victims, and then a fourth and final category, which I think is equally important, is when violence is used, how is that violence represented? Is the violence that's used by the state, is it represented as something that needs to happen, where there's no alternative to it happening? And also, does it lead to successful outcomes? Is violence a panacea? So, I mean, take an example like Unthinkable, that film with Samuel L. Jackson and the Welsh actor Michael Sheen. I don't know if you've seen this one. 2013. Michael Sheen is a terrorist who's he's Muslim. He's a white Muslim, and Samuel L. Jackson has to come in as an expert torturer to torture the terrorist in this movie. And the violence, rather like in 24, the TV series, Kiefer Sutherland series, the violence that is we are encouraged as viewers to say, right, you've just got to torture that guy, because the Michael Sheen character, the terrorist who's planted bombs everywhere, he is basically, he's a masochist. It's like the most, I don't know if you've seen this one, but it's the most absurd film. You should see it. It's odd. But basically, he's a masochist and he wants to be tortured. That's how far those kind of national security lines went. He wants to be tortured, and therefore it's kind of and so when Samuel L. Jackson as the torturer, as the goody torturer, is chopping his fingernails off and so on, we are encouraged to think that violence that is being applied by the feds is the appropriate thing to do, and also is leading to positive outcomes, or indeed a panacea, a kind of golden new world. It happens in a film like look at Godzilla, for example, that Roger Stahl talks about on Theatres of War at the end. You look at the most recent, I think it's the most recent one, 2019. Literally they use the hydrogen bomb at the end, and it looks beautiful. It lights up the screen. It solves the problem of Godzilla as a monster coming out of the sea. And so all of these narratives, I'm not saying that in a way they sometimes those kind of regressive aspects can make the film or the show or whatever it is, there can be because they're unpredictable and unexpected, and they act as a foil to the rest of the politics, they can make it more entertaining in a way, certainly more surprising. But it's a kind of intractable problem politically. You can't really get away from the fact that is often going to be an issue. Now, there are some, I don't know if I'm banging on a little bit here, but there are some films that really, really take the political message to heart, and they do an incredible job. And they do show victims, and they do show the villains in the right way, and they are faithful to real imperial history and so on. But they're few and far between. They would be, well, I suppose a biopic like the Che Guevara movie. Or possibly, well, I was going to say the Oliver Stone films, but even the Oliver Stone films, they only really show villains, victims, and the application of violence in sort of in ways that we would perhaps agree with, anti-imperialist ways, if you look at his films overall. You look at a film like JFK, that's really it's a white savior film. Really, it's saying, oh, back in the 1950s or 1960s or something, everything was wonderful before President Kennedy got killed. And yeah, there's a few minutes on foreign policy there, but not much. So I think if you watch all of Oliver Stone's films, Heaven and Earth, about it, actually set from the perspective of the victims in Vietnam, and you combine them all together, he's providing a comprehensive analysis of Western imperialism. But if you take one film at a time, perhaps not so much.
You know, it's funny.
That was a good answer.
Yeah, that was. Yeah, you did answer my question.
You can interrupt me, by the way. I'm sorry. I just
you answered more than one question, by the way.
Oh no.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned I, Daniel Blake, because I remember watching that movie and I really enjoyed it. And you know, finally, I don't even recall the scene that you mentioned.
Oh,
that's one of the most important scenes. But I had to watch it again. But anyways, there was another movie that he did later on. Maybe it was, you know, a way to compensate what you just described. It's called We've Missed You. You know, it's about the working class family that is affecting by the whole. I don't know if you're allowed to name any brands here, but you know, some brands that are involved in delivery, you know, that are competing with the taxis, etc. So, anyways, it was just I was just thinking, you know, maybe Ken Loach was trying to compensate the critics he received after making that movie on Daniel Blake. But anyway,
Ken Loach has been going to. I was literally at, he was on the stage with me 2 days ago at the Gaza protest.
Okay.
He lives around here.
Okay.
He's been going as a filmmaker since the mid '60s when he did Kes, and he would not in any way, I think, compromise for a second on anything. He's a great and good part of British society. And I don't think he'd be making those kind of calculations. So I think what I was saying about the guy using the mouse, I wasn't saying that particularly as a criticism. I was saying that my friend read it differently. She was like, no, it just is. And also, I think she was also pointing out that she said, I've lived on benefits. I've been homeless for a while. I didn't immediately just turn to prostitution. Like what happens to the woman in that.
Yeah, she's doing shoplifting as well.
Say again.
No, I say she's doing shoplifting as well as a way to survive.
Yeah, and shoplifting. So I think what the concern from her was just like it's creating this sort of stereotype. It's feeding into this stereotype. But at the same time, you've got an hour and a half, and you've got to make the film entertaining. You can't make it. It's very difficult to make these things perfectly. So or take a film like a Starship Trooper by Starship Troopers, which was again on TV. Just happened to be on TV last night, I think it was. Now this is about going. This is if you haven't seen it, it's an interesting one because it is a bunch of young, extremely good-looking actors from the 90s, from TV shows like I think Beverly Hills 90210 and all that kind of like very, very mainstream crap. And Paul Verhoeven, the director, puts them into military outfits in the future, military uniform in the future, and has them go and fight giant bugs in space. It's a comedy, but it's a science fiction. And the whole idea of the film is that basically it's just this bunch of yahoos, these terrible, horrible, imperialistic dicks. Going up to other planets to blow up a bunch of bugs that they've got no business messing with in the first place. So it's a funny film. It's a very much an anti-imperialist film, but that's all on the what do you say? That's all on the offbeat. Like you have to know that that's the intention of the director before you can see how funny that is. If you see what I mean. So people could watch that rather unironically. But so there's an example of where the genre itself is helpful in meaning that the anti-imperialist message can be slipped in. But if it was just, it's just quite difficult to do, to make. I mean, I suppose to really bring it down to brass tacks, do you really want to see like a horrible imperial force just mowing people down through in history in the real world. It's hard. The world is, you can turn the news on for that. You know, the point of Hollywood is for entertainment. Actually you can't turn the news on for that, as you well know, because they won't show it properly either, because everything's framed in those kind of ways. But you can get a sense of what's happening in Gaza, for example, from watching news reports. But who would want to go to a movie about Gaza right now? I mean, you know what I mean? It's different. There are always compromises with the very nature of entertainment. I guess that's one of the other reasons I find it so interesting. And I've continued to find this area so interesting for 20 years, because it's not just looking at the representation of the real world. It's also got this odd aspect of, like, how do people get entertained by this thing? And so there's something quite sinister, I find, about the nature of entertainment itself when it's politicized. And anyway,
yeah. I just had to step in real quick before I pass it over to Fernando, just because we're pressed for time right now. You mentioned the conversation that James Cameron had about the creation of Avatar, and so that's for individuals that do get the book. That's pages 64 through 68, specifically 66 through 66 and 67, where he mentions, I just want to go out on the record and say that I'm very pro-American. I'm very pro-military. My brother was a former Marine, Desert Storm. We got a lot of friends who are Marines. So I made my main character in this movie a former Marine. He embodies the spirit of the Marine Corps. And so again, how is it that that this movie, again, people fail to mention that this is, and I told you this in the conversation we had, this is galactic settler colonialism. That's what we call Avatar, the Way of Water, what we call the Avatar franchise. It is white individuals trying to co-op indigenous culture via going. I did a whole extensive review about it. People can go and check it out. I'll send it to you, Matthew, so at least you can get an understanding of how we use even your book, to be able to justify that. In the mean. So I'm going to pass it over to Fernando because we are pressed for time.
Okay. Thank you. So the book, right? National Security Cinema highlights how films often serve as tools of ideological indoctrination. How can a decolonial Marxist approach help us unpack the specific ways in which the film obscures the realities of imperialism and maintain white hegemonic control over global narratives?
I think that again comes down to seeing the films, when they are at their best politically, will come from the perspective not of the perpetrators of violence, or from the most powerful forces, particularly those that we know already. We know what the British and American governments are like, but when there is what has been called in the past third cinema, by Marxist scholars, and third cinema is the term for films that come from not just necessarily from the third world, but from the perspective of what used to be called the third world. So from developing countries or poorer countries, or indeed from poorer, a bit like I, Daniel Blake, for example, from poorer communities. So those films, those perspectives that are inevitably going to be more grassroots, are going to be more healthy, I suppose, for entertainment. At the same time, I don't want to sound too kind of, I'm not sure if that's the solution. Like I said, I'm not sure if that's the solution to everything, because people want to watch, I don't know, some crap like Air Force One with Harrison Ford saying "Get off my plane" and things. people like that, and so I've always been a little bit wary to. I know I'm not saying you've asked this, but I'm a little bit wary of advocating only one way of doing creative things. My main concern has always been that the national security apparatus should be out of Hollywood. That's the main thing, because then I think that opens up the space anyway for people to do things creatively in the way that they want to. And so you haven't got the government breathing down your neck, or I should say the militarized government breathing down your neck at that point. So I do think that if the government did just get out of it, I think you would have a lot more grassroots productions, which would come from a wider range of perspectives. Because it's important to note that, you know, one of the things about these films is that one of the things about this process is that it doesn't just make the whole political nature of things worse. It inevitably makes, or at least 9 times out of 10 or 99 times out of 100, it makes the actual products worse creatively. It makes them bland and boring, military solutions, yawn, yawn, yawn. And the reason that they put it on is because they know that if they can have a big plane or aircraft carrier blowing up, and it just makes it a visual spectacle. So it's easier to get people to continue using their eyeballs on the screen, and that's going to make it easier to sell the Burger King and the whatever it is that's product placed in the thing, or that, you know, as part of the advertising. So by getting rid of the national security role within cinema and TV, I think you'd create a much healthier environment, both politically and creatively. And I think we'd see a greater degree of diversity in every sense of the word. I don't know if I quite answered that question as directly as I did the other ones, Fernando. I'm flaking now. I've talked for 40 minutes. It's my bedtime.
No, it's all right. I appreciate that. We do have one more question. So considering the arguments presented in the book about Hollywood's role in shaping public perceptions, how can scholars and activists work to counteract this form of ideological control and promote a more equitable and diverse representation in media?
Well, I think one of the things, Isaac, you were talking the other day about perhaps putting in a Freedom of Information Act request or two.
Yeah, I'm putting in 12 to be exact.
Oh, brilliant! That's exactly what we've always wanted people to do. And
yeah,
can you remember the ones that you've put in?
Sonic the Hedgehog, currently the ones that are out. Knuckles, the TV series. I put out a FOIA request, or at least it's in the works right now, for the Apple TV series that was about Huey P. Newton, the cigar. Put in a FOIA request on a multitude of movies that had connections to Trumbo. So I'm digging deep into. I'm not trying to give up anything on air right now. But yeah, I am putting in requests through the Freedom of Information Act. So
yeah, please do. That sounds fantastic. I'm sure we'd all love to hear what the results are of that. Although, as you know, it takes some time. I can't remember if I mentioned it in the book, but during lockdown, I had a large envelope fall through my letterbox, and I hadn't got a clue what it was. It had CIA written on it. I was like, what the hell is this? And it was an FOIA, and then I looked through it, and it was all emails from Ben Affleck. And I was like, what is going on? So I was already hadn't seen anyone for days because it was Corona. And then I looked, and then I'd realized that I'd put in an FOI for Argo in 2012. So this was took 8 years for that to come, over 8 years for that one to come through. So that's one thing. That's a very narrow thing that people can do. But I'm really glad that Isaac has been has started on that process. I guess the other thing is just well, I'm sure there's a million things that people can do to make culture and society better. So I'm not quite sure if I'm quite the right person to answer that perfectly. But what I would say is that it's also important to remember that this is that these things that are happening on screens, and the dominant narrative, the dominant ideology, which is being transferred through the screen. I mean, people can turn that off, and people can go out into the street. So as I see it, there is a far bigger problem than just there being thousands of crappy, horrible products out there that are controlled by the Department of Defense and these other national security organizations. There's a broader ideological problem through screen entertainment, but there's also, as a result of that, and as partly as a cause of that, there is also this, inherent inequality or systems of domination within the real world. How do you solve that? Well, it's not all about TV and film. It's also about getting out onto the street and being part of communities and part of street movements, and just doing everything you can be to be a full human being, living within a joyful, as best you can, a joyful set of communities that are trying to do the right thing. So I guess maybe that sounded a bit of a holy answer, but you know what I mean? Like, it's not all. If we solve Hollywood tomorrow and we make it really, really good, or 10% better, it would be a massive thing, but it wouldn't be the only thing.
Yeah. Good. Thank you. Go ahead. Sorry for now. I completely cut you off, brother.
No, you didn't. I just wanted to thank him. Go ahead.
I mean, do things like what Fernando did with your kid the other day. That's part of that's incredibly important.
Yeah, like and you mentioned something that's very important. People think like, oh, if we fix Hollywood, then we fixed imperialism. It's like, no, we've barely scratched the surface. We've barely even scratched the surface. Like think of it like a house full of roaches, and you have to exterminate the whole house. You can't just clean one room and be like, oh, okay, yeah, everything's good. It's like, no, it's an infestation of roaches. So you need to clean out.
This is an inherent problem with, say, conspiracy theories. Noam Chomsky talks about this a lot. He was my kind of intellectual guiding light. And so he talks about, say, the Kennedy assassination, or even other, perhaps even bigger things than that, which I won't bother going into. But say the Kennedy assassination and this huge emphasis that people have had on the enormous amount of time that people have invested into that. And Chomsky's point is like, but even if it does turn out to have been like the CIA or the FBI or whatever it is, what are you going to do? They're all dead by now. And even if they weren't, what are you going to do? Like, just round up a few people from the FBI, shoot them around the back of the cow sheds or stick them in jail? That's not going to solve anything. And it's the same with these other big conspiracies. The one I was thinking of is 9/11. But so yeah, there does have to be systematic change, isn't it? And keep going.
Yeah, no, I think we're all on the same footing. I want to say thank you, Dr. Matthew Alford. We're gonna try and have you back on with Tom Secker, potentially, in the coming weeks. I think that this is a conversation, especially if I can in the emails be more extensive than just giving you a link and asking you when you can come on. Maybe I can give you maybe some key movies that maybe you have already, you have extensive, maybe you can help us on, that we can go over. I want to say thank you for coming on again. This is not the last time you'll see Dr. Matthew Alford on Black Power Media and the Rise Up Morning Show. I'm going to put you down for now, but is there a way that the viewers can be able to find your books, to be able to, I know there's one book in mind, and I was seeing your face when you were off screen. You're doing that face right there, that one. There's a specific book and I can't find it. Is there, maybe you can help me out? Maybe I got the name wrong.
Was it uni? It might have been. First of all, let me just say, it's lovely to meet you all, because I hadn't met you before. Boona and Fernando. I had met Isaac. You might have been referring to Union Jackboot.
Yes, Union Jackboot. Yeah, there you go. I don't have a copy of that in front of me, but Union Jackboot is about what your teachers and media didn't tell you about British foreign policy. So obviously it touches on United States content as well. The best place to get me is just to search Dr. Matthew Alford on YouTube, Facebook, and what's the one I use? I suppose those two are the main things. I just literally when I came through the door after my walk in the field a minute ago, just before I came on,
I had a proof copy of a play that I've done of The Writer with No Hands. So I'm just going to very quickly show you this. So this, I've never shown this. It's the cover isn't properly done yet. It's like got "not for resale" written all over it. But I did a novel about an alleged forced disappearance of a Hollywood screenwriter in 2016, and it was all a conspiracy. And it's a novel that I did, and the film did well and premiered at Hot Docs and so on. Anyway, I've done the stage play version of that, and that's literally here. So it's the cover will be improved a bit, but that's coming out at the end of that's coming out on Halloween of this year because it's sort of oddly spooky, genre-defying story. So that's something I just wanted to plug while I was here. The Writer with No Hands stage play, and just because you're there, Isaac, and also because you guys mentioned we were talking about French earlier. My books, although 2 or 3 of them were self-published initially, all of them have been published by established publishers these days because the French market picked up on them. And so here's Real Power French version. I don't suppose anyone will buy this, but I just wanted to show you.
Oh,
so that's updated.
One of the best ones. They're the one who published Vijay Prashad. So yeah, it's very, very good publishing house.
Yeah, Editions Critique, I think. So I was pleased with this, and I updated it for 2022 or 2023. I can't remember which. And then we had this one, which is massive, which is L'Empire vous divertat, which I think means
the Empire entertains you.
Diverting people in Empire or something. So this
the Empire literally means the Empire is entertaining you or entertains you.
Yeah. So this is a huge book, illustrated book that they did again in France with which has made the whole of national security cinema. Well, we added several chapters to it as well, and it's all properly illustrated and everything. I mean, I'm really pretty pleased with those books. I'm sure that your viewers would rather have them in English, but I still thought I just wanted to show you because of those reasons.
No, I mean, Fernando and I are based in France, so I think this is something. Maybe we should have mentioned it earlier.
Okay, well, that was in which case I did a good plug there then.
We are in touch with the comrades of Edition Critique. We've actually organized.
Excellent. Yeah.
Maybe since you're not so far, you can, we can organize something with them, and probably
that would be fantastic.
Yeah,
I'd really like that. Yeah. Maybe we'll talk off screen as well, because there are probably a few people associated with that who I'm in touch with, and you probably know.
Okay.
Yeah, we still got about an hour left of the show, a little less of an hour left. I'm gonna put you down though, Doctor. So officially, your job is done for today, especially.
Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate you. Thank you very much. Thank you, It was great having you on.
Okay, guys, have a good evening. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So that was Dr. Matthew Alford of the University of Bath, co-writer of National Security Cinema. How are you guys feeling about that conversation?
I thought it was great. I thought it's an important conversation to have, and it's important to have people write about this, But like he said, he mentioned the fact that, things like Hollywood, even if we, got rid of Hollywood, imperialism is still alive, But I think, propaganda is a huge tool. It's one of the main tools that our enemy uses on a constant basis, and the mental side is real. It's one of our main problems. So I appreciate, Dr. Alford coming through, and I appreciate us having this conversation, because I think it's crucial.
Yeah.
Yeah, it also has a way of explaining things that make it very easy for people to understand, right? Because one of the issues that we have with some scholars is that they use these, very, well, I wouldn't say pedantic, but, very complicated words that, if you don't have a PhD yourself, it will be very difficult to understand. So he gave very, concrete and straightforward examples that I think everybody can easily understand, right? So I really appreciate, his.
Look at you sounding like Malcolm X right now.
You know, last week, the last week we did last week was on, you know, Malcolm X and Fred Hampton. So
You know who he's been learning from.
yeah.
No, I think you guys are.
No, we need
both-
the few minutes that we have left. We're going to talk in easy language that everybody in here can easily understand.
The-
No, I really appreciate, you know, also thanks to you for, you know, having him on the show. I didn't
Yeah.
know him personally. And
Yeah,
the fact that his books are available in French is also a good indication of the quality of his work. And like I said, the publishing house that has published his work in French is really a good one. You know, it's really anti-imperialist.
Yeah, I hate that there's no English translations to some of those books that are on there. It pisses me off.
I'm sure it'll come.
Yeah. Like even your guys's the president of your guys' organization. I'm really looking forward to English translation.
Africa Unite. Yeah.
Africa United. I
The title is
really,
in English, but the book is in French.
yeah,
Exactly.
if someone's out there, please tune in to the email for Black Power Media so that we can make that happen, because that work is very vital to the Pan-African struggle. You know what he mentioned, and he didn't want to get into deep on one of his books called Riders with No Hands, the one that just got turned into a screenplay. But I will. The writer at hand that it's figuratively speaking at hand. The writer that's based off the book and the documentary off of Real Stories on YouTube that you could watch for free. It goes over the disappearance or the death of Gary DeVore and the conspiracy that he was deeply entrenched in to a writing a screenplay about the U.S. intervention into Panama, for which there was potential sex trafficking of minors, both women, both girls and boys, sexual intercourse between U.S. officials and whatnot. And so all conspiratorial that he wanted to, that the CIA got to him and he wanted to leave. And the weird part about the whole situation is that he drove on the wrong side of the freeway for 72 at 72 miles an hour for I think like 5 minutes, and crashed into an aqueduct without crashing into any cars, and his hands were cut off when they found him in the thing. So it's just like a lot of you could speculate as to what happened, making a movie, like all of this stuff. And so he doesn't really like to go too really deep into it, which I can respect because I've watched the documentary and I've kind of seen, he goes in depth. You guys can go to my network and watch the episode that I had with him where he kind of goes into how that after 10 years removed from that, how he feels about it. And so super dope guest, gonna have him on again with hopefully Tom Secker, so and we can go a little bit more in depth because Tom Secker, they shared this book, so a lot of this is Tom's. Most of this, all of it is both of theirs, but 50% of it is Tom Secker's work, and so we're gonna have to respect that as well. We're going to take a quick break for Black Power, but when we get back, we're going to go right into a conversation that's actually prevalent right now. I think that we need to talk about is the co-optation, the kind of CIA-ish sus behavior that is, if you don't vote for Kamala, you're anti-Black because you're standing against genocide. This whole conversation on TikTok and Twitter we're going to get into. So please enjoy this Black Power break for Black Power. We'll see you guys in a minute. Rise up.
Rise up.
Rise up.
Como los Mao Mao. Concluyente como los Mao Mao. Como los Mao Mao. Como los Mao Mao. Somos resistentes como los Mao Mao.
And let me remind ourselves of the great warrior Spartacus, the slave who would not live a slave and had the right to resist and rose up against the Romans. And in battle, those warrior slaves were smitten and dying on the battlefield. And the Romans were looking for Spartacus. Where is Spartacus? And a Saracen warrior said, I am Spartacus. Where is Spartacus? And a Philistine slave warrior said, I am Spartacus. And by God, a Hebrew warrior slave said, I am Spartacus. We are all Gaza. We are all West Bank. We are all 1948 Palestine. We are the refugees in the camps. We are Palestine, and we stand with Palestine. And we will not allow, we will do everything we can to stop the Gaza open-air concentration camp. We say it to you, Israeli Zionists and your supporters, your Americans and whatever. We will not allow that open-air concentration camp in Gaza or the West Bank or the refugee camps to become extermination camps. That is to do or die. And we have in such pride to be here with our sister, the great warrior of Palestine, Layla Khaled. And we rise to you, Layla. We rise to you as we did with Naledi Pandor's father, who was a mentor of mine, in exile, a leader of our Communist Party then, and of the ANC. And I was saying to our minister, our brave foreign minister, who was a child at the time, Comrade Naledi, I knew you as that little girl in exile. I'm now the Madala, and you're still a little girl with fire and strength. And I said to her, Comrade Naledi, when Layla Khaled stood up and delivered a blow back in 1970 or so, we had, Layla, a solidarity meeting in Red Lion Square in London, and her father was speaking and praising you because we recognized, comrades, in the Palestinians what we were, what we came from, our dispossession, our right and humanity's right to stand up and resist, to resist that oppression, that slavery. And in international law, you have the right to rise up against occupation. Remind America.
Independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao, como los Mao Mao, como los Mao Mao, somos resistentes como los Mao Mao, independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao, como los Mao Mao, como los Mao Mao, somos resistentes como los Mao Mao.
That was a production by Buna.
And Fernando.
And Fernando. Yeah, that was Fernando, as everybody should know. That is the intro music. 340 hip hop. I'm
340 MS.
MS. My bad.
Shout out to my cousin AB Cardenas, co-founder of 340 MS, and shout out to the real underground hip hop movement in Cuba.
Yeah, when you guys hear, my apologies, by the way, I just have to start off with that.
Bro.
My bad. When you hear that we're all Gazans and you go online and you see individuals wanting to vote who at one point were completely against voting for that said party, are now saying, hey, because she's from the diaspora, she's a woman, we need to vote for her, but she aligns with the genocide that's going on and the multiple genocides that are going on across the globe. Like when you hear those words that are spoken, how do you make that correlation, of a large group of individuals that just completely after, like that are like, okay, we're voting for genocide when we just were against genocide. like how do you guys feel about the current, just the current topics that are going on online right now? Like, if you don't vote for if Palestinians don't vote for Kamala, they're anti-black, and if and this whole Islamophobic approach, which me and I was speaking about it, and I think Buna kind of agreed with me. I'm not really too sure when I said, I was like, this kind of seems like a fucking CIA op.
You shouldn't even say CIA-ish. It's CIA, not ish.
Right.
What are your guys' thoughts though? Because I'm my mind is I could say 1,000 things about this, but I'd love to make this an interactive conversation, as this is a group morning show. So yeah, I'll pass it to whoever wants to whoever picks it up.
Nando, go ahead.
Buna's like, not me.
It's it's
I can speak. That's why I'm wearing the kufi.
No, it's
really
really
silent for 2 hours, so he needs to speak.
I've been silent for 2 weeks now. No, but it's really tiring. It's really tiring, because all you have to do is look at her record, right? You have to look at Kamala Harris's, police imperialistic record. You know what I mean? To understand. And it's not very difficult to find out what she's truly about. And also the whole thing about, she's black, she's a black woman, it shows how much people they're just letting the propaganda talk to them. You know why? Because has she said straight up, like, listen, I'm a proud black woman and I will do for my people. Mm-hmm. It would be one thing. Then we could be having this conversation. You understand what I'm saying? There's nothing coming from her that sounds anything, similar to that, right? What she has said is what we saw her say about how she will protect Israel, how Israel has the right to protect itself, right? And how she will support Israel. That's what we know. So the whole thing about, you have to support the black woman and all of that, that's some straight up bullshit, propaganda bullshit. You understand what I'm saying? There's no other way to put it. Yeah, it's neo-colonial propaganda bullshit. There's no other way to put it. And anybody who says different is just misinformed, or is just straight up the feds. Yeah, there's no other way to put it, man. But it's disgusting the way she's been speaking about the whole thing. Just straight up, she's saying it straight up too. So what are people arguing about? I don't get it.
I think you have to also look at where's she getting the money from. I mean, those donors, wouldn't have her. I'm not even talking about the whole U.S. imperialist system, which has been serving now. In terms of Israel, they know that, if you speak against the genocide, or if you show some sort of compassion to the Palestinians, they can exit you. And we have very recent examples. Okay? So this is something that black politicians reflect on, because basically what happened over the past 2 months is that we had 2 black officials who made, I argue that they sacrificed their political career, because they could have kept silent, on the genocide, and they knew that AIPAC would come to them, okay, if they spoke out. It was very obvious in the case of Jamal Bowman, despite some of the setbacks that he made. We have to give where credit is due. And I think the brother, he didn't cave in. Okay, I'm not saying that what he's been saying and doing since October 7th was perfect. Okay, because I think he's also made some mistakes, even before that, including taking the trip to Israel, which most U.S. politicians do. But anyways, I think they are somehow embodying, a tradition of black resistance, which consciously or unconsciously they've been perpetrating, okay, which also has been historically defeated. And this brings me to the second point, which is, as Malcolm said, his famous speeches, the ballot or the bullet, talking about black people and their relationship to vote, is that we're double trapped, triple trapped. Anywhere we go is just another trap, right? So here you have a lot of our brothers and sisters who end up voting for the Democratic Party, not out of, because, well, first of all, most of them don't vote I think gives a good indication of how faithful they are regarding the system. Okay, despite the fact that we also need to assess, and this has been done by like Glenford, the late Glenford of Black and Gender Report, and many others. Margaret Kimberley and others are still doing the same work, which is we have to assess the impact, the direct impact that the election of Obama had on the Black community. Okay, because there was a shift within the Black community regarding some key issues of racism. Was in power was the first time in history that the Black community in the US became the most hawkish pro-war community in the US. And this is something that we have to, we cannot overlook that because, as you know, in the US, polls that are done on a regular basis. And for example, when Obama decided to attack Syria, which was eventually aborted, but when he successfully and unfortunately destroyed Libya, the majority of the Black community was in, at least there were more Black people who were supporting that destruction of a country on the African continent than whites and Latinos. And you actually have statistics on that. But the initial reason why Black people are so tied, quote unquote, to the Democratic Party is because the alternative is fascism. Okay, the alternative is the white man's party. Okay, which I think many Black people have identified as such. But the problem is that the only alternative is a pro-war, pro-genocide, pro-imperialist party. Okay, in terms of war and devastation of other countries, not only in Asia, West Asia. I think the Democratic Party has one of the dirtiest records in world history. So I do really don't, wouldn't like to be in the position of our brothers and sisters there. They have to vote against the white man's party, but at the end of the day, some of them, those who are more enthusiastic about voting for Kamala, for example, they are basically co-signing genocide. And what really hurts me is that our brothers and sisters in Palestine, those who are suffering, those who are being genocided by the settler colonial state of Israel, which we should never forget was the main ally of apartheid South Africa. Okay, because you have some of them who are, from time to time they come and teach us some moral lessons about, anti-racist solidarity. When our people were struggling in South Africa, not only was Israel providing the type of weaponry that the could not get even from Western countries that were still, violating the arm embargo, but then the Israeli lobby in the US were attacking our brothers and sisters who were speaking against them. Okay, so this is a very dark episode of the relationships between blacks and Euro-American Jews in the US that people should never forget. Because even if you read the scholarship that was done by some, Jewish Americans, they show that there was a real split between the blacks and Euro-American Jewish organizations. And a lot of people have been talking about the rise of Black power and how that rise of Black power has contributed to weaken or destroy the so-called Jewish and Black alliance. Okay, but the fight against apartheid and the fight against Israel's support to apartheid has been one of the key issues back then. And the Israeli lobby there has been demonizing, has been discrediting, and even repressing our people for speaking out against the regime that was supporting one of the most fascist, white supremacist, racist regimes that we've had on the continent. So I think that we have to be firm on our principles. Also display some kind of, I'm not trying to, excuse or condone. I'm not even talking about those on TikTok or, those you can see on social media. Because when Isaac said it's CIA-ish, I think it's CIA. Okay, and I don't want to sound conspirational, because if you look at Maduro's accounts on social media, we know that they be constantly attacked by people bombarded on artificial intelligence, and you don't need a PhD in conspiracy theories to know that all these fake accounts that are pumping up,
Mm-hmm.
cheering on Kamala Harris on behalf of black people, or saying that if you're Palestinian, you don't vote for Kamala Harris, you're anti-black. Okay, how can you be Palestinian and vote for someone who's basically condoning the genocide of your people? Doesn't make sense. And what really hurts
No
me,
sense.
I'm going to conclude on that, is that the people who are being put at the forefront of the genocide of the Palestinian people are people with dark faces. And to
Mm-hmm.
be more precise, black people. Okay? We have Ministry of Defense, Secretary of Defense, who's black. Okay? You have the Chief of the Armed Forces of the US, who's black, Charles Q. Brown. We can give those names, Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, the representative, the vice president, of course. Okay, I'm not even mentioning here anymore, and the two, actually, the two ambassadors of the U.S. at the Security Council, those who are vetoing the votes to allow ceasefire in Gaza. Two blacks, okay, Linda Thomas Grenfell, and the other one, his last name is Wood. I forgot his first name. Sorry, but anyways, this really hurts me because they although those are the children of the blacks who actually black organizations who sold out, okay, in the 1950s and 60s, those who betrayed Paul Robeson, W.E.B. Du Bois in return of some exchange, some the so-called compromise of 1954 that Gerald Horne likes to talk about. Okay, in exchange of some concessions on Jim Crow, they have basically decided to align on the U.S. imperialist agenda. This has been affecting our community back there. So I'm really sad for the black community there in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
I really sympathize with our people there. The fact that they don't have any choice, but have the white man's party and then the genocide party. Both of them are genocide parties, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
But I think anyone who says that black people have to vote for Democratic Party because Kamala is black or because he has progressive agenda is a crook, is an enemy
Yeah.
to the community and should be confronted.
Ooh, Buna
I
with
spoke
his
like 30 minutes. I can go
no,
now.
no, that's thank you. No, and I'm gonna compound on what you said too, because there's another piece by Malcolm X that literally goes over exactly what's going on right now, called Zionist Logic.
Oh,
This in particular talks about how these rods of iron, these spears, that are across the globe that aid Israel, that aid their manipulation, that aid the genocide on Palestinian people, and in the midst of that, what they do to the African masses is if they don't, if they can't inflict fear into them, what they do is they put an individual in place that looks like us. So then it's like, hey, look, now we're on the right side, everything's going to be good. And really, nothing's going to be good. You're working to please, as a puppet, to please the exploiter, and extracting our resources and underdeveloping our country when we're in a developing stage, primal, a developing stage. You aid and abet that. You aid and abet white hegemony. And so when I come across these things on Twitter, whether it's Instagram, and I'm seeing people out there say vote for Kamala, she's black girl power, black girl magic, she's for black women, she's for the diaspora. And then you look at her track record, and her track record says otherwise. Her track record says, oh, she's actually arrested women from the diaspora for keeping children home for having sickle cell anemia. She has kept people on death row when they were innocent, had to be forced to make sure that they weren't euthanized. She advocated for Jim Crow fucking slave labor. That's individuals literally getting paid pennies to do what firefighters say that they fight their lives for. But if you look at the other way around, it's really I think a lot of people who are in prison fight these fires, and firefighters get paid to sit on their ass. So she's never had a good track record with black resistance. She has no track record with black resistance of any time. She has a track record of upholding and appeasing the white hegemonic masses. And we have individuals now, the same way that it was with Barack Obama, appealing to, oh, okay, we could have the first black woman president. How does that change the narrative? It doesn't. What you're doing is you're putting a female face on imperialism now. That's what you're doing. And then putting all of these identity politics on there. They're like, Gerald Horne says, identity politics. That's exactly what's going on. And so I'm glad that at least we were able to have, this discussion surrounding it, to kind of further it, I wouldn't even ask the question, what are some solutions? Because one of the solutions is us literally talking about it right now and then expounding on it on our own said other, networks, but, how do you, it's just so hard to comprehend such a large group of individuals that are propagating this false myth, that we need to uphold, this idea because she's a woman of color, that she's gonna then fix everything, when all we've seen, especially in the last 2 weeks, is her ramp up, say the quiet part out loud that Biden wasn't saying, is, I'm going to give unwillingly, unforgivingly, the unconditional support to Israel, meaning I'm giving them millions, if not billions, of dollars to bomb children. That's just they're saying the words without saying those said words, and it just blows my mind. Go ahead.
Let me jump in there.
Those people are talking about, Kamala Harris being representative black woman. What would they say about Claudine Gay, who was fired from Harvard because the Zionist lobby was not happy? I'm saying that she's a revolutionary, okay. But if you're concerned about having black female faces in high places, why don't they say anything about Claudine Gay being fired? And she was in a very good position. She was the first black female president of an Ivy League university, and probably one of the best universities in the world. So those people are saying, okay, you should defend Kamala. Where were they to defend Claudine Gay, who, by the way, has never defended students? She got fired because the Zionist lobby was not happy about the way she was bashing enough the student encampment. Okay, I mean, this is all nonsense. It's not like, if we didn't have like the example of Obama, and by the way, Obama is the president who expanded the military footprint of the U.S. in Africa in a way that no other president in the history of the U.S. has done. Obama is actually the president who started. Okay, he destroyed Libya.
That's not a coincidence. That's not a coincidence.
Exactly. You just mentioned all of those black faces in high places. Yeah. That shit's done by design, because now they say, oh, look, a white face didn't do that. Look who did that. And it's such a mind fuck. I can't even express it further. Sorry to interrupt you, Buna.
No worries, no worries. But it's, I don't know, sometimes I feel desperate, but at the same time I understand our brothers and sisters there that are, in a very, very, very tough position, because when Trump comes into power, it will be a very tough moment for all of us, not only people in the US but all of us, because we know what type of politics he will be.
US politics affects the whole globe, man.
Exactly.
And those people are saying you should vote for Kamala. Those are people who, you don't even need to dig very deep to realize that they don't care about African people. Okay, because if you care about African people, you just don't think about the type of benefits, the type of material benefits that, or even symbolic benefits. Because even when Obama was elected, the situation of the black people in the US, where in terms of mass incarceration or poverty or unemployment, hasn't improved. Okay, so actually, it's when the black president came into power that this is the economic and social condition of the black people have been through a significant degradation over the past 20 years. But those people, they really don't care about African people, and unfortunately, you have a lot of people like that in the diaspora, whether they're born in the US or when they're as migrants. Some of them just, are like, let me get my benefits, and I don't really care about the impact of the politics of the US on African people worldwide, not only in the US but worldwide, because now the US, I don't know how many dozens of bases they have in Africa, but you can be pretty sure that they will increase if
Of course.
Kamala Harris is elected president. So I wouldn't really mind about those sellouts, those uneducated, those anti-African people, spreading their propaganda on social media, knowing that many of them are FBI and CIA fabricated. And if you think this is conspiracy theory, come
No,
come to the show and we'll discuss it.
I think this whole conversation is important, and I think it kind of highlights the importance of Black Power media,
yeah.
and what's going on here, because I think the propaganda is still so much that there's still a lot of brothers and sisters, that don't even know that the struggle is still alive for Black liberation, that don't even know what Black liberation is about, that are still believing that it's about integrating, that still believe that. That's why they buy the whole um, Black girls magic and all this bullshit, because they believe it's about Black faces in high places, and what's going on here at Black Power Media, where we're really connecting our struggles across the globe, is something that's really important for our people to know and to understand, and I think this ties into the whole thing with Kamala Harris. Understand what I'm saying? Because we're blinded, or a lot of our people are completely blinded, and they truly believe these things. You know what I'm saying? I know it from talking to certain people. And like you said, it's sad, but we gotta keep on pushing. We gotta keep on organizing, mobilizing, doing what we're doing here. And it's not for everybody. We know it's not for everybody, but the struggle continues always.
Yeah, and if you want some real Black girl power, Black girl magic, tune in to Decolonizing Feminism
That's
with
right.
Janice Jackson, Joy
Please do.
James, and the rest of their co-hosts. Really did it. I watched back that episode, the inaugural episode that they had, and I thought that was really, really good. And I'm looking forward to the next episode as well. And hopefully they they go over this in their own way, because I would love to hear from a sister's perspective, an African sister's perspective, on how they, how they're interpreting what's going on right now. So shout out to Decolonizing Feminism on Black Power Media. Tune in. I'm not too sure when exactly their next episode is going to drop, but just know that when it does, it's going to be fire. As the last one, the inaugural episode was amazing. Watched it twice. So
no doubt. I did want to mention that as well. I appreciate those sisters, because what they're doing is extremely important. So it's it's a privilege for us to have them, on Black Power Media. And definitely, I saw their inaugural episode as well. It was really great. And also, so shout out to all of them, and definitely, shout out to Professor Griff as well. I've definitely been checking out, Arm the Masses, for sure, without a doubt. And shout out to, RSTV as well. Kalanji had a dope episode recently. So definitely, everything that's going on.
Tune in to Professor Griff today at noon.
That's right.
We'll be live in effect with some deep-rooted consciousness. So please tune in to Professor Griff's Arm the Masses, also known as ATM. At least that's what I call it. Hope I don't get in trouble for that. No, I think that might be a good way, a good way for us to wrap it up. I do have some prior engagements. I'm pretty sure you guys do as well. So we will see you guys in the next one. I want to appreciate everybody in the chat. I want to appreciate everybody that tuned in. I want to appreciate send a shout out again to our guest, Dr. Matthew Alford, co-author and writer of National Security Cinema, Writer with No Hands, Union Jackboot, which I'll be getting my hands on as soon as I can find a copy of that. Even if I can't afford to fly to England, so that's out of the question. nonetheless, you guys, please go like, share, subscribe, ring that notification bell, subscribe to Habana Negra, Vital Hoops podcast, to Buna's podcast. Buna, you got to put your podcast in the little headline.
No, I don't have my own podcast.
Yeah,
this one is enough.
Then you did this one. Oh wow, okay. So because you get your own Buna.
This is my podcast.
Shout out to Rise Up, the Buna moment.
With the Buna report,
I do want to mention, make sure you get that Afro Pick magazine.
Yes.
Go to blackpowermedia.org and get that Afro Pick magazine. Sure.
Yes. So again, we will see you guys tomorrow. But most importantly, to everybody in the chat and to the co-hosts, rise up.
Rise up.
Rise up.
Sometimes the riot is a quiet one, or the battle is to love yourself and function in society where voices of reason are muted by anxiety, like gaining notoriety is selling your soul. So we tend to go no deeper than the shallow water level, trying to keep us overhead in the face of all the slurs and the stares, mentally frozen, paralyzed by fear of failure and success. So we lock, stock, barrel, running while it's crumbling. All these towers and they're babbling, but the baby's in the bath and the stash under the bed on my head, spinning from the circles and the puppets and the strings that they pull. Then we move. Reactionary warfare never produces winners on the field.